to the first event of this fantastic conference. There's a lot going on, as you all know from looking at the program, so we'll get started because once we get started, things are happening at pace. There's not a moment to lose. So welcome. I'm Eric Aronoff. I'm an associate professor in the Residential College of Arts and Humanities, and I teach literature and writing. And I have the honor of moderating this first panel, Origin Stories, a roundtable on literature, cinema, and pedagogy. And so, again, just want to say thank you for everybody for coming to the conference. We have a lot to celebrate here, and I know many of you have traveled a long way to be here, so thanks. And then thanks also for coming at this relatively early hour. So we have an interesting, great panel here, kind of advertised as a roundtable, which means that we're going to have some interesting presentations, and then we'll have a lot of time for kind of question and answer and conversation between the panelists, between you all in the audience and the panelists. So I'll start by saying the idea of the panel, Origin Stories, really, we're going to have a variety of kind of media and disciplines represented here: film, teaching, writing, history. But the unifying idea really is really how one's perspective is shaped by one's point of origin, where one is coming from, one's positionality, how that shapes the way you see the world, the way you reproduce your world, the way you represent your world, and the way you represent others. Just a quick word, some of you in an earlier version of the program saw that Syed Kashua, the famous Palestinian-Israeli writer, was supposed to be on this panel. He was very committed to come to this conference, and we worked very hard to get him here. In the end, there were some issues with his work visa through his university that prevented him from coming here for various reasons. But you know, he wanted very much to be here, and we wanted him to be here, and we did everything we could. But we have our remaining kind of very prominent panelists that will have some fascinating things to say. So let me quickly introduce all three, and then we'll go just one after the other with their presentations. And then afterwards, we'll have some time for Q&A. I may have some questions for the panelists. They may have some questions for each other, but we'll also want questions from the floor. So our first speaker is Rachel Harris. She's an associate professor of Israeli literature and culture at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. She's the author of several books, including The Ideological Death, Suicide in Israeli Literature, and Warriors, Witches, Horrors, Women in Israeli Cinema, which I think will largely be the subject of her talk today. She's also co-edited several books, Narratives of Dissent, War and Contemporary Israeli Arts and Culture, and Casting a Giant Shadow, Transnationalism in Israeli Cinema, which is forthcoming, and she's the author of numerous articles as well. And I'll also say she is a fierce anti-BDS warrior in the MLA, which is one of the ways that I've known her also. So she's a very strong voice for Israeli studies and Israeli literature. Our second speaker is someone who's kind of coming home, Ilana Blumberg, who for many years taught in James Madison College. Now she's the director of the Shandy Rudolph Graduate Program in Creative Writing and a senior lecturer in the Department of English in Bar Ilan University in Ramat Gan. Before making Aliyah to Israel, she taught for 9 years in James Madison College, and she received the MSU's Teacher Scholar Award in 2010, and is the author of prize-winning memoirs, Houses of Study, A Jewish Woman Among Books, and her forthcoming book, Open Your Hand, Teaching as a Jew, Teaching as an American, and that's also going to form the topic of her talk. And then she also has another book called Victorian Sacrifice, Ethics and Economics in Mid-Century Novels. And so I'm going to be very interested to hear about the ethics of Victorian literature and the ethics of teaching when she's speaking. And then our last speaker, Marc Bernstein, is our own Marc Bernstein, an associate professor of Jewish Studies and Muslim Studies at Michigan State University. And he is appointed in the Department of Linguistics and Germanic, Slavic, Asian, and African languages here at MSU. He received his PhD in Near Eastern Studies at Berkeley, and his primary research interests are Hebrew and Israeli culture and the intersection of Jewish and Islamic civilizations. He directed the MSU Jewish Studies Summer Program at Hebrew University in 2008, 2009, and 2014. He's also the coordinator of our Hebrew program, and the author of the book Stories of Joseph. Yes, Stories of Joseph. So without further ado, I'll turn the panel over to Rachel, and thank you again for coming.
The nice man who's working with technology. So I wanted to start actually as the opening act of the day by thanking Yael for organizing such an incredible event that has taken so much planning and brought so many people together. So I actually just wanted to say congratulations and thank you. So I'm going to speak for about 15 to 20 minutes about the film industry in Israel, particularly women in the film industry, to give you a little setup and a taste of culture in Israel at the moment. So Israel's first full-time feature film was called Hell 24 Doesn't Answer from 1955. It was the story of 4 soldiers told through flashbacks who were defending a hill in the 1948 war. And what we get is 3 flashbacks, the stories of the 3 men, and the 1 woman in the unit appears in their flashbacks but doesn't ever have a story of her own. And yet in the final scene of the film, we have her holding the flag, and it's because of her holding the flag that the hill is then given to Israel. And it sort of sets out our symbolic understanding of the role that women will play in Israeli cinema for the next 30 years. They would function as helpmates, sidekicks, auxiliary figures, mothers, girlfriends, nurses, that would help men be the real heroes who were telling the real stories. And the real stories were whatever male stories of heroism happened to be. The film also starred a number of leading women, and this was very a big feature of the period was a lot of the actresses in the 1950s sort of went on to become starlets in Hollywood. So Haya Hararit, who's one of the figures in the film, goes on to have this international career. And what's really interesting is this exporting of Israeli identity. From Israel's perspective, what was happening was these women were going to Hollywood to showcase Israel. They were the new Israelis. They were also a symbol of how modern and Western and cultured Israel was, because look at how America is receiving our stars. And on the other hand, the Israelis, the Americans actually used them to represent Middle Eastern Oriental figures, gypsy women. She appeared, one of them appears in a James Bond film as a gypsy figure. They appear in, these epics. Ben-Hur as a kind of Middle Eastern figure, and you can see her face has been blacked a little bit, like darker makeup. In L'Atlantide, so these kind of mystical science fiction roles. And so there's really this tension from the beginning in how Israeli cinema is exporting itself and understanding the act of exporting and how it's being imported and the role it's understood to have in the US. Other women who appeared in the film who were not Ashkenazi women. So, of course, Haya Hararit was Ashkenazi, and even though she was Ashkenazi, so of European origin, she's represented as Oriental. Whereas the actual women who were from the region, Shoshana Damari, who was Sephardi, and Margalit Oved, who was Yemenite,